we have two very outstanding experts on geopolitics and foreign policy invited to speak today. Our topic is assessing China's 20th National Congress of the CPC. It is a one-week conference, congress, once every 5 years only, starting on October 6. What will be the impact on Asia and the world? And what is the importance to our neighbor China, the world's largest nation and the second largest economy on earth now? We will invite two speakers to give opening statements, Professor Bobby Tuazon and Professor Lucio Pitlo III. And after their two opening statements, we shall have a question and answer forum with Professor Bobby Tuazon. We'll start first with Professor Bobby Tuazon for opening statement. Professor Tuazon is one of the top geopolitics experts in Southeast Asia. He is director for policy studies of the nationalist think tank called Center for People Empowerment in Governance, or CENPEG. He has been co-author and editor of 15 books, writer of many analyses, former chairman of the Political Science Department of University of the Philippines, Manila, where he is a professor and where he was awarded 6 times as the most outstanding faculty of UP Manila. Let us welcome Professor Bobby Tuazon for his opening statement.
Maraming salamat, Wilson. And thank you also for your excessively generous introduction. I would have wanted some things not to be mentioned anymore, but thank you anyway. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our participants. Good morning to my fellow panelist and good friend, Professor Lucio, a graduate also of the Asian Center. Tama ba yun, Lucio?
Yes.
Center UP.
Yes.
And of course, Senator Nikki Cosetting, former Senator Nikki Cosetting, and our guest from the media. I hope I will do justice to the topic, Wilson, because this is a somewhat new topic for a media forum.
Yes.
Particularly, we will be talking about this Congress. What is this Congress about? What do you mean by the National Party Congress? Anyway, China will be holding its 20th National Party Congress of the Communist Party of China, which is also called NPC. Now there's another NPC, but that is the National People's Congress, which will be held next year in 2023.
Yes.
Also, I think in November. To somehow provide some basic information, no? Medyo informative muna tayo. The coming National Party Congress will be attended by about 3,000 delegates from all over the mainland China, including delegates from various people's congresses or party congresses from the county level, municipality, provincial, and so on, and also ethnic minorities or national minorities in China, and then you have also representatives from the People's Liberation Army or PLA and other agencies. Now, I think I was able to gather some advanced information about the agenda of the coming Congress. And the coming Congress will take up some constitutional amendments, amendments to the CPC Constitution, They'll be also talking about or dealing with electing new officials, new party leaders from the and for that election, the National Party Congress will elect the members of the Central Committee. Many of them will still be around with the Central Committee, which is composed of about 350 members. Now, out of the 350 members, 200 are regular members, while 150 are called alternate members. These are the alternate members, of course, will be the upcoming new members of the Central Committee. The CC, or Central Committee, on the other hand, will elect the Political Bureau or Politburo, and under which is the Politburo Standing Committee. Now, the Standing Committee, composed of 7 members, takes care of the day-to-day party affairs. No, so in short, the position of the Standing Committee is very important. Expect the re-election for the second time, because this will be his third term of General Secretary Xi Jinping, who back in 2017 was acclaimed as the quote-unquote core leader of China, which virtually elevated him to the level of Chairman Mao Zedong, who was one of the leading co-founders of the Communist Party of China in 1929. So those are the important details about this National Party Congress. Some of the, I expect the National Party Congress to discuss the 5-year development plan. There will be some discussions about the 5-year development plan, and also the revitalization of the rural provinces to narrow the gap between the rural and urban centers. As you know, this National Party Congress is very significant for the simple reason that it is being organized and hosted by the Communist Party of China, which has had landmark achievements ranging from leading the armed revolution from 1927 up to 1949, armed revolution that was aimed at disempowering landlordism, or rather feudalism, what they call feudalism, bureaucrat capitalism, and imperialism. I'm mentioning this so that we will all be familiar with the significant aspects and the historical narrative of the role of the Communist Party of China. When China finally achieved its independence on October 1, 1949, it immediately the party immediately guided the launching of the socialist construction in China, because, as you know, of course, the goal of the Communist Party of China is to establish socialism en route to communism. And theoretically, their party was and still is being guided by Marxism and Leninism. Those things. So socialist construction, the very important part of the socialist construction that they launched immediately in 1949 is the massive land redistribution, distributing land to the landless peasants, who were to be formed later on into collective communes or production communes. That is very significant in the sense that it was not only an economic program, it was also a political program that was meant to disempower the feudal landlords, especially the warlords who at that time, before the conclusion of the revolution, were in power. In the meantime, just a side note, the victory of the Chinese Revolution forced the Kuomintang forces, led by General Chiang Kai-shek, to retreat in Taiwan, and there is establish what they call, and which they still call today as the ROC, or the Republic of China. Anyway, between 1949 up to the present, many significant things that took place. And just to fast forward, in 1980s, this was the period of transition toward the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, who became during this period as the General Secretary of the CPC. And I think, as some of you know, Deng Xiaoping was instrumental in launching the new policy of opening up and reform. Opening up was designed to open China to the globalization system, and this was marked by the establishment of important special economic zones that were intended to attract foreign investments, but mainly coming from Hong Kong and also Taiwan, and later on also Japan, and other countries. Sumunod na lamang itong mga Americans at saka iba pang mga Western European investors. So what happened? Why is China the second most powerful country in the world today? And why is China is set to overtake actually the US? They have achieved what many countries have not achieved, including the US. They were able to liberate 850 million people out of absolute poverty. They were able to develop the momentum of modernization in many aspects, including technology, including research and development.
While waiting for Mr. Bobby Tuazon, Professor Bobby Tuazon, maybe we could invite Professor Lucio Pitlo to start his opening statement. Then when Professor Bobby Tuazon comes, we'll let him continue. He said, okay. I think his internet connection he's out of town, so I hope it's okay. Professor, thank you, Professor Bobby Tuazon. We'll wait for him to come back with his internet connection. Our second speaker is Professor Lucio Pitlo III, earlier mentioned by Professor Tuazon, a graduate of Asian Center, University of the Philippines. Professor Lucio Pitlo III is research fellow at the Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation, and also a member of the board of directors of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies. He was also a lecturer on Chinese Studies at Ateneo de Manila University, and also one of the top geopolitics analysts in the country. Welcome, Professor Pitlo.
Magandang umaga, Wilson. Thank you for the kind introduction. Just a minor correction. I had studied in the UP Asian Center, but I was not able to finish my program because I went to Peking University, where I finished my Master of Laws program. Thank you for the generous introduction, for inviting me this morning to share my views on the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China, and then its regional and global implications. I'll I'd rather focus on the foreign policy implications of this reshuffling because I'm not very myself not very familiar with the intricacies of Chinese domestic politics. So I have a short presentation, and I was hoping to share my screen. So essentially, the outline of my presentation, I'm gonna start with discussing the a brief on the domestic implications of the 20th CPC Congress, and then I'll touch on the foreign policy implications of this periodic political reshuffling, looking at three trends: continuity, institutionalization, and expansion of Chinese involvement in regional organizations and its initiatives. So I'll be touching on its Belt and Road Initiative, the BRICS Plus, and then the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And then, of course, looking at new initiatives that China recently, in recent years, had announced and most likely to get traction under the third term of President Xi Jinping. These are the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. Then finally, I'd look at Taiwan, the implications of the 20th Party Congress on the cross-strait issue, and then look at ASEAN-China relations. How will this impact on the relations between the world's second largest economy and its neighbors in Southeast Asia? And then finally, look at Philippines-China relations post the 20th CPC Congress. So again, just to run through my short outline. So for the domestic implications, as mentioned by many scholars and analysts closely following the developments, and as well as by Professor Bobby Tuazon earlier, President Xi Jinping is likely to get a third serving in the coming 20th Party Congress, and he will likely retain the power triumvirate, meaning that he will be able to keep his position as General Secretary of the party, the President of China as a country, and then the chairmanship of the powerful Central Military Commission, which oversees the PLA. So I think the interesting things to watch would be, one, will be the next premier. Of course, there are reports about the status of Premier Li Keqiang, whether he'll be able to get another run in the office, or whether he would be replaced, or whether he would be put in a different position, but still be part of the Politburo Standing Committee. The composition of the Politburo, the Standing Committee of the Politburo, will also be very crucial because this will display how powerful President Xi will be in his third term. So whether we will see more Xi appointees, or whether there will be a compromise, meaning putting in appointees from other factions to keep the harmony within the collegial, the body. Those are things to watch. And of course, this third term of President Xi Jinping, the Congress, the announcement of the people that will be the next to govern China and implement its security and foreign policy domestically and abroad. One thing to watch will be whether he would start really displaying affection or deference to a potential group, a successor, whether he will start really training someone to succeed him in the future. Now, as I said, I'll try to focus more on the foreign policy implications. And here I see three potential trends. So one is a lot of policy continuity, and then institutionalization and expansion of Chinese initiatives, as well as Chinese involvement in organizations that China helped found, establish, and champion. So I'm going to start with the Belt and Road Initiative. Started in 2013, announced in Jakarta and also in Kazakhstan, September and October of 2013. So it's already 9 years and it's still going. So China had emerged as the biggest bilateral creditor in the world, especially for developing countries in the South. And this development, of course, drew growing scrutiny from traditional lenders, um, both bilateral and multilateral lenders like the IMF and World Bank. And of course, recently we have seen reports of IMF and World Bank raising concerns about countries uh, getting a lot of Chinese loans, and especially countries that are in high potential for debt distress. And so this is a development, of course, with a lot of implications, because the Belt and Road is likely to be continued under another term by President Xi. And so projects abroad that will get funded by China under this initiative will be put under more scrutiny and put in the spotlight of bilateral rivals as well as multilateral organizations like IMF and World Bank, especially if these countries have shown um, potentials to default, as was the case for Sri Lanka. And so this is something that, of course, will be watched carefully. Secondly, I think there's a lot of implication of the Belt and Road in the climate change transition. So if the Belt and Road will defund or shift away from funding much hydrocarbons or coal projects abroad and move instead into funding more renewable projects, whether solar, wind, or hydro, then there is a lot of potential to accelerate the transition to green and more sustainable forms of energy. So I think these two developments on the Belt and Road are some things to watch post the CPC Congress, the 20th iteration. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, founded in 2006, and seen as a club that announces or heralds the beginning of the multipolar world order. And as we all know, BRICS has started to grow. And of course, of the two countries, there are two countries that have signified their interest to apply to become the initial expansion members of BRICS after South Africa was included. These are Iran and Argentina. And it seems that because there seems to be no objection from the existing members, then most likely these two countries may become BRICS Plus members soon. And as we all know, the developments in the Ukraine war, regardless of the outcome of the Ukraine war, Russia will largely turn towards Asia, to the east, because of course, its reverses, the attitudes, adverse or hostile or suspicious attitudes towards Russia by European countries, especially in light of what's going on in Ukraine, that Russia may turn eastwards, and this may strengthen China-Russia connection. And BRICS is a regional organization that stands to benefit from that. Other potential expansion countries of BRICS include Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. And these are emerging middle powers. And so the expansion of the BRICS Plus is, in my view, one of the trends for a post-20th Congress of China. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is another regional organization to watch. Again, this is Eurasia, and of course started as a security organization to thwart the threats emanating from terrorism, extremism. But of course, in recent years, we have seen SCO transition from a purely security organization. They have begun discussing economics as well as culture. And we know that the first overseas trip of President Xi since the COVID-19 was to Samarkand in Uzbekistan, where the 22nd summit of the leaders of SCO countries was held. So this speaks volume of the importance that China attaches to SCO, which is growing. So this is the only organization, I think one of the few regional organizations with a very strong security focus, where both India and Pakistan are part of. We know that India and Pakistan have their own dynamics, have their own disputes over Kashmir, but that aside, they are part of this growing club, which has a very strong security anchor. And of course, there are countries that have recently acceded to the SCO, one of which is Iran and Belarus. And most likely, the pressure on Iran, pressure from the West on Iran may likely push Iran closer to BRICS and closer to SCO. So some observer countries that also are taking part in SCO dialogues are Afghanistan. So far, if Afghanistan will become part of SCO, this will be the first, I think, international organization where the Taliban, who ruled Afghanistan, will be welcome. So this, of course, may in a way bode well for the stability of Central and South Asia. Mongolia, neighbor of China, is also an observer to SCO. And of course, there's an increasing number of countries taking part in SCO discussions as dialogue partners. Now, there are two new initiatives that China launched in recent years that have, of course, gained a lot of, steered a lot of attraction, of course, good and bad. So one is the Global Security Initiative. So of the concepts of the so far these two initiatives are big on principles and concepts, but still lack concrete details. And we expect that more of that flesh will come in the coming years. So most likely the third term of President Xi Jinping. So one contentious concept on the Global Security Initiative was this concept of indivisible security, because it is seen by some as a swipe against alliances directed versus third states. So alliances or collective security organizations has long been a feature of the global security architecture. But of course, some countries, China including, had expressed reservations, concerns, criticisms about this configuration, and instead proposed an alternative, which is the GSI. And one of the core concepts of that is indivisible security, meaning that the security of one country should not come at the expense of the security of another. And of course, this is a contentious and controversial subject in light of the Russia-Ukraine war, because of course Russia is arguing that the expansion of NATO undermined its security interests, and therefore it drew a red line on Ukraine, and it acted accordingly. And as we all know, China's reaction to the Russia-Ukraine war it elicited a lot of criticism and reaction from the West. The Global Development Initiative is another undertaking by China, announced by President Xi Jinping in the UN General Assembly of 2021. So one of the goals of the GDI was to help fast track the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals under the UN 2030 agenda. Hold on. So the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the fast track of implementation of that, and of course debt relief for heavily indebted poor countries, especially in Africa. So these are some of the announced goals and objectives under the GDI. So of course, these two initiatives will elicit concerns, suspicions, criticisms. Of course, in relation to the GSI, a nagging concern will be whether China will seek foreign bases. And I think this is a concern especially raised by US and its allies. But that aside, suspicions and criticisms on China's initiative will be an issue, but whether durable alternatives will be put on the table, that is another thing. So China will likely adjust its initiatives based on these concerns and issues raised, especially by participating countries. We have seen this in the Belt and Road, wherein China tried to factor in more local labor, more local content on overseas infrastructure projects, tried to enter into renegotiations with countries, especially when they change leaderships, which of course stall or affect the timeline of some Belt and Road projects. So they have expressed readiness to negotiate with new leaderships to discuss anything from interest rates and provisions or other clauses of loan contracts. So on Taiwan, there was a concern, there was a question of whether the strong rhetoric and the posturing of Taiwan made by Chinese leaders in the run-up to the 20th CPC Congress was just a way to pump their chest, or to show their nationalist credentials. And so if that is the case, will there be an expectation that these emotions will subside after? So there's that point. But I think reunification will remain integral to the Chinese national rejuvenation project. And of course, we know Xi Jinping is very strong in this department. The dilemma for China is if they try to play the long game, which they have tried and they're still doing, the worry is that the window for reunification may narrow, may close. And of course, if you look at the timelines of countries that were divided and eventually reunified, the longer it takes, the harder it gets to reunify. We have seen Vietnam able to reunify, but after a very devastating war, and it took them 21 years to do that. Germany also reunified after 40 years. We know the Cold War. Korea remains divided to this day, and China remains divided to this day. So both Korea and China, we see about 74, 75 years since the end of World War II. So the longer time it takes for both sides of the strait to come to terms with one another, the harder it will be. And the pressure will mount on Chong and Hai, the leadership in China, to do something. And of course, recently, in the aftermath of the visit of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, China reacted strongly. And I think this will be a trend going forward, especially now that China has more wherewithal to display its displeasure. So it will react strongly versus perceived foreign interference on a matter it considers domestic. So the cross-strait issue is very sensitive, and China considers this at the core of U.S.-China relations and its relations with the international community. So it will double down on calls for adherence to one China policy by countries that have diplomatic ties with her. At the minimum, I think Beijing will attempt, will desire to reach consensus on the cross-strait issue with its counterparts in Taipei, and would wish not to see the island Taiwan declaring de jure independence. So of course, it will try to employ both carrots and sticks in this regard. So of course, economic largesse for the carrots. For the sticks, it will try to diminish further Taiwan's remaining diplomatic allies, countries that recognize have diplomatic relations with Taipei, and constrain oppose participation of Taiwan even in non-political international organizations or events. And it will also employ sanctions on agricultural goods. We have seen this in the aftermath of Speaker Pelosi's visit to the island, as well as setting up military exercises, military pressure on Taiwan, especially in its offshore islands closer to the mainland. Now, how about ASEAN-China relations? My view is that the economic ties between ASEAN and China will continue to deepen, and because China will likely the pressure on China from the West will continue, the geopolitical geostrategic rivalry will continue, will intensify, And of course, this will have the force, will have the effect of China looking at alternative markets, emerging markets, and its neighbor in Southeast Asia is a prime candidate for that. So it's a competition with the US, especially on trade and economics, but also on other fields. Talk about decoupling of supply chains. And of course, it's a rift with the West in relation to the war in Ukraine and the increasing security overview, a security review of Chinese investments in the West, whether in US or Europe. So this will put hurdles for Chinese capital abroad, especially in the West. So they may likely shift more trade and investments towards Southeast Asia, among other emerging regions. And of course, this is supported by data because China has been ASEAN's largest trade partner since 2009, and ASEAN during the trade war with China and the US, ASEAN became China's largest trade partner in 2020. And the volume of two-way trade is expected to grow with the following developments. Of course, the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that came to force early this year with many countries already ratifying, the Philippines not yet. Of course, the growing physical connectivity between mainland Southeast Asia, especially, and that of China. With the advent of the China-Laos Railway, Thailand making the most of it so far. Myanmar provided their stability. The plans to connect railways that would link Kyaukphyu and Mandalay, key cities in Myanmar, all the way to Kunming in southwestern Yunnan province of China. This will likely get traction. And so this will put momentum on the Kunming-Singapore Railway, part of the Trans-Asia Railway Network that will provide China's southwestern provinces access to the sea via rail connections. Another development that will also boost China-ASEAN economic ties will be the development of the Hainan port. Of course, this will be big because in terms of land area, Hainan is much, much bigger than similar big trade zones or ports like Singapore, Hong Kong, or Dubai. And there are plans to really make it a big FTP by 2035. So Philippines. So how will relations with the Philippines and China relations be affected? So neighborhood and better diplomacy will be central to China diplomacy, and this will the impetus for this will increase under the third term of President Xi Jinping, especially given the hurdles and setbacks in relations between China and the West. 3 senior level Chinese officials already paid a visit to the Philippines since President Marcos came into office. Of course, State Councilor for Mr. Wang Yi was one of the first Chinese leaders to visit, pay a courtesy call to President Marcos, and Vice President Wang Qishan was there during the inauguration of President Marcos, and of course, Minister Liu Chiao of the International Department of the Communist Party of China was the recent Chinese official to visit Manila. And of course, there was this invitation for President Marcos to visit Beijing sometime in the future, hopefully before the end of the year. The South China Sea disputes will remain an irritant challenge to bilateral relations, and China would expect the Philippines that both sides will be able to find some kind of modus vivendi, be able to handle incidents in the South China Sea in order to maintain stable bilateral ties. There's willingness of China to grow political relations with the Philippines. We have seen this in attempts to bolster party-to-party exchanges. Of course, the recent visit of Minister Liu attests to that, meeting Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, and also leaders of other political parties. The readiness of China to expand economic cooperation with the Philippines will be there. The Belt and Road and the synergy with the Build under the previous Duterte government will likely be continued under a different name, Build Better More under President Marcos, will still have a lot of confluence with China's BRI. Agriculture, of course, very important. And of course, we know our President Marcos, is concurrently Secretary of Agriculture. That speaks a lot of the importance he attaches to the sector. And I think China's greater opening of its market for Philippine tropical agricultural exports, the fruit exports to China, be it bananas, pineapples, and most recently durians, this can actually provide a boon for many Filipino growers and farmers and exporters. And of course, we know agriculture is a very important sector, very important to address rural poverty will be to develop agriculture. And so partnership with China in this regard will be very critical. In tourism, we know China is the biggest tourist market, and many countries, including the Philippines, are looking at the question of when China will open its market. And of course, countries are already preparing for it, trying to invest in their infrastructure, airports, tourism-related infrastructure. So these things will happen, the opening will happen, it's only a question of time. Whether after the 20th CPC Congress, it will be open before Christmas, it's something that, of course, business people and countries that are dependent heavily on tourism, like countries in the region, Thailand, for instance, the Philippines, of course, increasingly tourism is an important sector. So we are all looking at this development. Now, in relation to the recent issue about the offshore gaming, I think that the pressure on the Philippines coming from China to really clamp down on POGOs because of course, of the its association with crime, especially of the illegal POGOs, and its impact on the morals of the Chinese people. So, of course, I think Beijing will really intimate to Malacanang, to its counterpart in the Philippines, to do something to wind down the operations of this offshore gaming entities, especially those operating legally. So I will end there. And again, thank you for this invitation, and I look forward to the interaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lucio Pitlo III. I know you have a appointment in Indonesia. Thank you. Next, we'd like to invite again Professor Bobby Tuazon for his part of his opening statement. Welcome back, Professor. Hope our internet in the Philippines can improve nationwide.
Thank you, Wilson. I think at this point we should open
the floor for the questions, Professor.
Questions from the media and other attendees.
Yes, yeah. Professor. The first question somebody is asking, I got a question here. What do you think would be the reaction of China, the next set of leaders led by President Xi, to the perceived pivot to America of the Bongbong Marcos administration? Do you see it seems to be tilting towards US pivot? What is the reaction? And number two, what would be the effect of this National Congress on the Taiwan issue also?
Well, on the second question,
yes.
Definitely China will pursue its reunification with Taiwan. So there's no question about that. And the last time that China did an act about this issue was when it deployed or assigned its naval forces near Taiwan. No? I think this happened last July, if not June. They will continue to oppose the belligerent policy of the U.S. in extending tacit support to Taiwanese independence, given the latest incidents that were characterized by the visit of, for instance, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The U.S. is trying to use Taiwan as some kind of a fodder, no? A fodder to intimidate China. But China, of course, knows this. It will continue to oppose the U.S. belligerent policy on Taiwan in any forum, but including the United Nations, which supports the One China principle. The U.S., as you know, pays lip service to the One China principle, despite the fact that this was adopted by two countries when the two countries opened diplomatic relations way back in 1979, and this was also adopted by the United Nations. But the attitude of the U.S. only to pay lip service and continues its bellicose belligerent policy on China. One thing is very clear as far as the Chinese are concerned. They have declared several times that no obstacle will prevent China from reunifying with Taiwan, even a military confrontation with the U.S. So that's very clear. Now, with regard to the Philippines, of course, the South China Sea remains to be a very sensitive and ticklish, thorny issue, especially in the light of President Marcos Jr.'s declaration during his SONA on July 25, where he declared that no inch of the Philippine territory will be surrendered to China. So there goes the strong and frank words coming from Bongbong Marcos. In the meantime, I see signs of the Marcos government tilting or shifting its foreign policy direction toward a pivot to the U.S. Why do I say that? First, the signs, telltale signs, include his bilateral meeting with Joe Biden, U.S. President Joe Biden, in New York last September, where he categorically said that the Philippines, in so many words, but this is the sense that I got, that the Philippines cannot survive without the U.S. So that's very clear. He said that he doesn't see the Philippines alone without the support of the U.S. And rightly so. I think it was a contrived statement because a few days later, the defense chiefs of both countries, Lloyd Austin of the U.S. and the OIC of the Department of National Defense, met in Hawaii at the Indo-Pacific Command of the U.S. to discuss strategic cooperation between the two countries and agreed to increase war games exercises between the two countries, as including the Balikatan shoulder to shoulder. No, I think they increased the number to 500 next year, and likewise, this year the war games will be participated in by the US's most powerful allies in the Asia Pacific, namely Australia and Japan, together with the Philippines. This increasing military partnership between the US and the Philippines is what I call a reversal or a a reverse gear to the former President Duterte's pivot to China or China-friendly direction and his threat against the U.S. to withdraw or to abrogate the Vesting Forces Agreement of 1999, which ironically he backed out from such threat. So what will be the impact of the National People's Congress on the Philippines? There's no immediate impact because this is a regular internal event as far as the CPC or the Communist Party of China is concerned. But definitely they are alerted to the fact with regard to the repivot to the US coming from the mouth and military actions of the Marcos government. I sense that I think this is something that's expected by China. They can live with this kind of policy, but of course they will pursue a very tight rope with regard to how they will be able to relate with the Bongbong Marcos administration, except if they can increase economic cooperation with the Philippine government, considering that the U.S. has nothing to offer with regard to economic support or economic cooperation with the Philippines. So China will walk on a very tight rope with regard to the. In the first place, Marcos Jr. had been invited by Xi Jinping for a visit to China. But if that will happen, I will think that will happen either in December or early next year.
Thank you, Professor. There's a question here. All the media are welcome to ask questions. Please message or text. Professor, there's a question here by some media. They texted. What is your reaction to some Western criticism of China's political process as not similar to the USA or Europe style political system? Because they have this Congress and everything. Is it, they said China should follow, or I saw in CNN they want China to be like the Western style political system. So that's why they're criticizing. Last night I watched Farid Zakaria. He was saying the West is disappointed that China has not become like them. After 30 years, 40 years, they were thinking, Farid Zakaria said, the Americans and the others were thinking if we trade with them, we open the economy, they will become like the US. And they have not, and they're not happy about it. That's what they said. It's like a bipartisan consensus that they have failed to change China. What is your reaction in the context of this National Congress? They criticize there's no democracy now in China.
Let me say first that the American elite, the political elite of the US, have no right to dictate the rest of the world to adopt its own so-called democratic system. Because in the first place, the US is not a democratic society. It is a plutocracy. It is a plutocracy where a tiny elite led by the financial oligarchs, including the financial oligarchs and banks from the military-industrial complex who rule America. They control, I think, 1% of the American wealth, while the rest of the America wallow in poverty and poverty that is increasing. And what is the right to say that they are a democratic country in the first place? The US is now plagued by racism. discriminatory practices, not only against the African Americans, but also against Asian minorities, especially China. So that is my response to that. I believe that each country in the world has its own inherent historical, cultural, and political value systems that allow it to form its own political system. That is true in the case of China. China, is not a market, or rather, it is not a country. It is not even a nation state. It is a civilization with 6,000 years of recorded history, and therefore it has a rich political treasury from which it is able to form its own political system. And one major measure, of course, with regard to the success of its political system is that the Chinese people trust the Chinese government, including Xi Jinping, by as high as 90%. Whereas if you compare the trust rating with the U.S. with regard to the American government, it is only 60 or even 40%. No. So if you try to compare the attributes of the political system, I think China is far above the league of the United States. So to emphasize my point, each country in the world has its own political system. And number two, no country in the world cannot dictate other countries in the world to follow its own political system.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a question, Professor, here from Kevin Bourbon. What is your reaction to presidential sister and Senator Amy Marcos explaining President Bongbong Marcos's foreign policy objective before the recent CSIS forum in Washington, D.C., where she said the Philippines, the idea is don't make us choose between the U.S. and China. What is your reaction to this statement of Senator Amy Marcos?
Well, if that statement from the sister senator of Bongbong Marcos is true, then I think she's just reflecting on the policy desires and preferences of the ASEAN member countries. Most, if not all, of the ASEAN countries do not wish to be placed in a situation where they will have to choose or to take any side with either China or the US. No? In short, the ASEAN countries enjoy their increasing and deepening economic cooperation with China. So they don't want that to be affected. But they are having second thoughts with regard to any security or military cooperation with the US. Well, some countries actually have military cooperation agreements with the US, like Singapore and Vietnam. But of course, that should not mean that they will immediately take sides with the US when rising tensions, and also tensions that are bound to deteriorate into confrontational skirmishes between China and the US. They don't want that to happen, and they will not definitely decide to take sides with the US.
Thank you, Professor Tuazon. There's another question here. Is if President Bongbong Marcos' so-called US pivot, is this in the interest, or is this in the national interest of the Philippines? A question from O.D. Mongao.
His pivot to the US is very clearly a far cry or a contradiction to his so-called independent foreign policy, which he announced during his inauguration address, when the new president declared that the Philippines will pursue an independent foreign policy. That actually is that tough statement has actually turned into a very lame statement the moment that Marcos said that the Philippines cannot, doesn't want to see the day when the US is no longer on its side. And definitely this was translated into concrete plans, which I mentioned earlier with regard to increasing military cooperation with the US, especially war games that are deliberately intended as exercises in a war scenario with China. So he's trying to double talk, to say the least, saying that he wants the Philippines to have an independent foreign policy, but on the other hand, entering into concrete plans that will make the Philippines closer, more and more closer, and in fact placing the destiny and future external relations policy of the Philippines with the US.
Thank you very much, Professor Tuazon. There's another question here. What do you think about the possibility of US military bases or facilities in the Philippines being used in case of a Taiwan conflict that might involve US intervention or participation? Is that a danger? Is that a possibility? What is the best scenario for the Philippines?
The modified Indo-Pacific strategy considers the Philippines' geostrategic location as a key element, as a vital element to that strategy, particularly including a war scenario over the Taiwan Strait. A recent simulated study done by a military institution, I cannot recall right now the name of that military institution, but the result of their simulated exercise is that the Philippines is in the best position to be used as a strategic base to deploy and assign American forces to a war scenario over the Taiwan Strait, particularly against China. So I think that is already in the blueprint. And unfortunately, the Philippines is already in the blueprint. The Americans will use the 5 military bases of the Philippine military that have been identified to host American forces, including their facilities in the Philippines, including that base in Nueva Ecija, in Pampanga, and other military facilities.
Thank you. Would that pose a danger?
And that is dangerous. So we should right now, as early as today, speak against that. as early as now, we should call the attention of the Marcos government not to allow the Philippines to be subjected, to be vulnerable to retaliatory attacks from a foreign country that is at war with the US.
Even North Korea, they already have long range or medium range capacities already, I heard. I read.
Yes. Again, the Korean Peninsula is in rising tension given the continuing military exercises, the joint military exercises between the US and South Korea, and sometimes including Japan, prompting North Korea to launch, to test the new missiles that they have developed, including the missiles that they fired above Japan, to the consternation of the Japanese. So that is another, I don't see how the US actually should be able to handle a scenario where they will have a war in the Taiwan Strait and another war in the South China Sea against China, and yet another war, continuing war in Ukraine, where the US is the #1 supplier of arms to the illegal government in Ukraine, led by the president, actor, comedian Zelensky.
Thank you, Professor. Related to what you said, what is your reaction to the proposal recently of the world's richest man, Elon Musk, proposing that a win-win solution for Asia is for Taiwan to become like Hong Kong-style special administrative zone or region under China with some autonomy, Hong Kong-style. What is your reaction to this proposal by the world's richest man, Elon Musk?
To be honest, Wilson, I haven't seen the full text
Details
of the statement of Elon Musk, you know.
Yes.
But obliquely, I think he wants Taiwan to be reunited with China under the system of one country, two systems. One country meaning China, they will respect China as the single mainland country, but China will allow the practice of two systems. Taiwan can still continue with its capitalist system as it does with respect to Hong Kong, Hong Kong's capitalist system, and also Macau capitalist system. Yes,
Thank
so
you.
that is well, that is a good news. And I hope
Yes.
Elon Musk is able to convince the president of Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen, who is the head of the DPP, or Democratic Progressive Party of Taiwan, who is treading on dangerous grounds by talking about separatism from China, or declaring an independent state separate from mainland China.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question from CNN Philippines, journalist Curie Cator. Can we ask you to ask your question to Professor Bobby Tuazon? Curie Cator of CNN. Can we unmute Curie Cator of CNN? Or I could read your question if you prefer. The question of Curie Cator of CNN. Hope you are well, Professor. May I respectfully ask if, iba pala to. Natatanong na pala what you said earlier. You said about Taiwan and military. If we have another question, here. What is your proposal on the joint people in the Philippines, some sectors, and even President Bongbong Marcos, I think, mentioned it also. Is he open to possible joint development and exploration of disputed area in the seas? Do you think after the National Congress of China, this could be pursued better on both sides? Is that a topic?
Excuse me. The proposal for a joint exploration and development of mineral resources, including oil resources in the South China Sea, is a 30-year-old proposal. It is a 30-year-old proposal that was first offered by Deng Xiaoping in Beijing when then President Corazon Aquino went on a state visit to China. So it's an old proposal, and as an old proposal, it has been reiterated so many times from one administration to another administration. And I think more recently, last June 30 and early July, when Chinese officials, including Foreign Minister and State Councilor Wang Yi, reopened or renewed such proposal. The core element of that proposal is that China is willing to offer a 60% ratio, 60% for the Philippines and 40% for China. But of course, so many constitutional and legal issues have been raised that only deterred and prevented such proposal from taking off. So there are remaining legal and constitutional grounds, although China has reiterated also that it will respect any legal declaration or ruling or preference, but that such proposal remains open. Marcos Jr. should use the bilateral dialogue mechanism that was open during Duterte's time in 2017. That was going to be used as the mechanism for resolving maritime disputes and also for taking up the old proposal on the joint exploration and development. The essential thing is to conduct dialogue, and more dialogues until both countries are able to reach a compromise. Because you cannot, I don't think it's possible to reach a 100 type of agreement in favor of one side. In diplomacy, there's always a compromise. Otherwise, diplomacy will not take off.
Thank you, Professor, for that good analysis. There's a question here from another media friend. What is your opinion about the concept of China's President Xi Jinping on community with shared future for mankind? How is this compared to the tendency of some in the West to have like America First type concept? Is there a way that somebody asked this?
I believe that the phrase community with shared future or shared destiny, if I'm not wrong, that those are the exact words. And those are the words not originally from Xi Jinping, but from the theoretician of the Communist Party of China under the standing committee by the name of Wang Hongwen. Wang Hongwen is the author of that particular phrase. Anyway, that has always been the policy of China. The preferential strategic policy is to maintain a peaceful environment in the world, not only in Asia, a peaceful environment in the world, peaceful relations between China and the US, to enable development to grow and to enable development to be spread to other countries, which China is now doing in the case of Africa. I think also in the case of Latin America and other countries in Asia, through such projects as the BRI or the Belt and Road Initiative. And then you have the BRICS system, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa conglomeration established, I think, 10 years ago, and so on and so forth. The U.S. has been accusing China of increasing its power in order to replace the U.S. as the global hegemon. And so many times, in so many words, and in so many public declarations, China has denied that it has any ambition to replace China as the global hegemon. Because, you know, a global hegemon is a difficult, dangerous thing. Global hegemony has been acquired by the US and before it that the British Empire through coercion and through military operations. And China definitely, as far as I'm concerned, does not want that to happen. But of course, that remains to be an obstacle to the strategic direction of China's foreign policy is the formation of a multipolar world to replace unilateral hegemony by the US that has been dangerous in so many decades and that has led to wars of aggression by the US in so many decades already. So China would rather occupy itself in developing the conditions and building the blocks for a multipolar world in which there is no global hegemon, in which everybody is equal. Of course, there are the major powers, and there should be equality and respect and agree to the pursuit of China's five principal peaceful coexistence, mutual respect, mutual non-intervention in the first place in the domestic affairs of each country, and so on and so forth. Now, that is, of course, a tall order. You will ask, of course, when that can be achieved. In what year can that be achieved? I think it is achievable. Probably, this is my fearless scenario, probably in 50 years or more.
Thank you very much. There's a question. Thank you for that very interesting analysis of the concepts. There's a question here. The National Congress of the Communist Party of China that will happen starting Sunday, it will be for 1 week. What impact will it have on the world economy and world stability now that the world is so unstable? Europe is at war, and then UK seems to be in economic crisis. US next month will have a midterm election. They seem to be in political turmoil also. Economically, they said the US is in recession, even though they don't want to call it a recession yet. What can we expect good news from China after the 1 week meeting? Will they continue with the reforms? Will stability there and maybe opening up of their tourism be good news for all of us? Are you optimistic after the 1 week National Congress once every 5 years? What impact on us?
The impact, of course, will depend on the leadership of the Communist Party of China. In the first place, let me just add that the National Party Congress of the CPC is an internal affair. that is meant to
Yeah.
institute some immediate reforms needed and to consolidate and strengthen the Communist Party of China to be able to pursue its leadership in the coming years and in the coming decades. So it's an internal domestic affair on the part of China. But I am confident that given the experience and the record, the performance of the past and present leadership under Xi Jinping, China will continue to maintain a correct international diplomacy. Internally, it will strengthen its rural revitalization. I think I mentioned this earlier.
Yes.
With the aim of bridging the gap between the rural, not rural poor, but between the rural countryside and the urban centers. They will continue to contribute their share in terms of technological innovation and modernization, in terms of stabilizing and normalizing the global supply system, where China will contribute, I think, agricultural products and also technological products, and so on and so forth. So that, I think, is the trajectory that will happen after the National Party Congress. It is not something na parang
yes,
parang ano malaki yung impact. Of course, I don't see it as that way, but normal lang yung kanilang takbo ng kanilang gobyerno. What they are doing today, they will certainly sustain that, but with more, I think with more vigor and you know that China has already transitioned from being a regional power into a global power. So China is definitely and I hope they will use whatever results they will have from the National Party Congress to start building the blocks toward a formation of a more peaceful, multipolar, and hopefully more equitable external relations among countries under a new multipolar system.
So essentially, that's good news for us in Asia. If they're doing well, they are outward looking and reformist now. There's another question here.
Let us not just rely on China to do good things.
Yes.
Let us do our own. Let us do our own homework and make efforts, not only the government but also people's organizations to contribute to a more peaceful world. Because today, the world is beginning to be, as I think the United Nations Secretary General said, a more problematic, more tension-filled world.
Yes.
So we hope to contribute something that will at least decrease or reduce rather than not just not eliminating such tension from happening, or preventing such global tension from happening.
Thank you. What about the question somebody asking here? The headlines about the Pogo controversial Pogo industry. Are you optimistic that it will be ended under the Bongbong Marcos administration, with the statements yesterday by senators, Senate President Sobiri, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, even Senator Grace Poe, seemingly critical of the social cost and bad image of the Pogo industry? Do you think this is one way to improve Philippine-China trade and tourism and normal relations? Are you optimistic the end to Pogos, the online gaming operations? How do you assess it?
Only if there is strong political will. especially on
yeah.
the part of the Marcos government. But I think
Yes.
both the Chinese government through the Chinese embassy ambassador and the Marcos government are in close communication with regard the objective of purging the economy of Pogo industries. And the Chinese, I believe, are quite serious about it, considering that more and more Chinese have been disappointed. No? So there are less and less Chinese tourists in the Philippines now, and that will be a tragedy to the Philippine economy, which depends also on tourism as the pillar of its economic growth. And considering also that China constitutes the biggest market of the Philippine tourism. If the Marcos government cannot purge or put any closure to the Pogo industry, then the economy will be in a bad shape because of that.
That's a good analysis. So, if just in case with political will, as you said, coming from the Marcos government, if they could ban or stop Pogos, there will be more chances we can become like Indonesia and Vietnam, attracting thousands of China factories, and like Thailand, attracting millions of legitimate China tourists, high-spending tourists.
You know that the Marcos government now is facing daunting economic challenges.
Yes.
The government is facing a very tough economic challenges, including inflation, increasing debt, increasing foreign debt, rising prices, increasing numbers of joblessness, I think, and so on and so forth. And by the way, there's been no positive signs of foreign investments coming into the Philippines compared to the period last year. The period this year, the third quarter rather saw a decline in foreign direct investments. So that will affect Philippine tourism also. If a foreign tourist sees nothing good about the Philippine economy, of course they can always come. They love Boracay and other tourist destinations. But you will not, even if you have a good tourism industry, a profitable tourism industry, I suppose you will not have a balanced economy if the other sectors of the economy continue to be burdened by declines and problems.
Thank you, Professor. So in essence, you agree with Department of Finance Secretary Ben Diokno and Senator Grace Poe and the others mentioning the so-called reputational risk for the Philippines if we don't stop the Pogos.
I agree, but there are other factors for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even Randy David wrote something. Thank you very much. And sir, there was also an Inquirer article. Some people claim that real estate industry would collapse if the Pogos leave. But there was an Inquirer column, business column, I think 2 weeks ago, last 2 weeks ago, saying it was similar to the arguments of some people before, saying if US bases are pulled out, the whole economy of the Philippines will collapse. But it did not collapse. The business columnist of Inquirer said that's a wrong logic, that if Pogos leave, the real estate market will collapse. What is your opinion on this?
The Pogo industry is a bane to the Philippine economy. The earlier it is ended, the earlier it is closed, the better, I think, for the Philippine economy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the reputation of the country also, no? You agree?
Well, definitely. We cannot stay longer as with a reputation as the haven of illegal gambling.
Yes, yes.
You know,
We should attract
that
legitimate
is not
business
good.
people.
That is not good to the economy after all,
Yes.
or in the long run.
I agree. Our neighbors, Vietnam, has thousands of China export factories. Indonesia also, but no pogos. You're correct, sir. Would you like to sum up your analysis of this National Congress happening starting October 16, Sunday again in China, since this is the world's largest nation and our biggest trading partner and already the world's #2 biggest economy? Can you summarize again the impact on the Philippines and the world and on China about this once every 5 years National Congress of the CPC? For your closing statement, sir, maybe you can wrap up your ideas. Yes, sir.
The coming National Party Congress of China, of the CPC, is very critical to China, given the regional and external, the regional global tensions and struggles that continue to persist. So it is also very critical because China will now chart the rest, its economic development years, leading up to the 2049 goal of making China a truly socialist country, and so on and so forth. So that therefore is very critical. The NPC event is a very critical event. I can only say that on my part, I will continue to watch. I will continue to monitor, and especially our friends from the media to continue to monitor the analysis that will be coming out from this National Party Congress in China.
Sir, before you leave, there's another question somebody texted. Can you describe China's political system in a short, like 1 or 2 sentences? Since this is a big political exercise, can you describe the political system of China for people like us who are not experts?
Well, I believe I also discussed this earlier, but let me just clarify again that the political system of China is its own political system. It has not adopted any model from any part of the world, let alone the American so-called democracy model. It evolved out of the intrinsic historical, political, and cultural value systems of China. And it is a product of the Chinese peoples. Considering
Do they have elections? Do they have elections?
Considering that it is established that the sovereign power of China is are the people. Yes, contrary to the views of many people, China they hold elections. As I was saying, Xi Jinping and the other 6 members of the standing committee under the political bureau are elected by the central committee. The 350-member central committee, on the other hand, is elected by the National Party Congress. And all over China, they have this system called People's Congresses, from the lowest grassroots level up to the top level. And members of such congresses are elected by the people in an election that is supervised by the local electoral committee, or what they call local electoral committee. In the sense, China shows the manifestations of a democratic system, even if they call their democratic system as a democracy with Chinese characteristics, not only socialism with Chinese characteristics, but people's democracy with Chinese characteristics. So they have elections. Anybody who would like to run in the village or in the county for the grassroots People's Congress there can run, provided of course they are qualified. And I think the minimum age is 18 years old. So you can run and you can become a member of the People's Congress at that level. You can be an officer of the official of the People's Congress at that level. The same thing goes through with Hong Kong. I think a few months ago they held their first elections. They elected the new chief, local government chief, together with a council of about 15 members of the Hong Kong Council, still under the principle of one country, two systems. And it has become, election in Hong Kong has made Hong Kong more stable. Unlike in 2019, 2018, when it was when Hong Kong experienced a catastrophic political devastation of so-called movements for democracy that are actually funded by the likes of the National Endowment Democracy of the US and the NDI, National Democratic Institute, and the USAID. So Hong Kong's now stable, and I think soon Hong Kong will be able to catch up with Macau, with Shenzhen, and other modern cities in China.
Thank you very much again for your very enlightening talk, Professor Tuazon. No wonder you are a multi-awarded professor at UP. You give us a crash course.
I have to cut you on that. Even if
you gave
I'm
us a very enlightening crash course, Professor. And you have demystified China to most of us. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, we need that. Demystify China. We need
yes. And thank you for your analysis, which will encourage normalization of Philippine-China relations, like any relations with all the other foreign countries in our neighborhood. That's great what you are doing to balance views and demystify. Thank you again, Professor Bobby Tuazon of Senpeg. And by the way,
thank you
Professor,
also for your invitation.
Yes, we'd like to invite you and the media also. October 16 is also World Pandesal Day. Please subscribe and like this YouTube channel and share to other people.